Taiwan is set to spend the most ever on its defense. We find out what that means.
I'm Liao for TaiwanPlus here in Miaoli, central Taiwan, where Indigenous Taiwanese ex-servicemen are equipping people with the skills they would need if Taiwan was to come under attack.
Taiwan's leading candidate for president, Lai Ching-te, tells foreign media what kind of leader he hopes to be. Plus, how Taiwan is empowering Paraguay's women entrepreneurs. A warm welcome to Taiwan Plus News. I'm Leslie Liao. Taiwan is planning to spend a record $19.1 billion on its defense next year. The initial budget plan was approved by Taiwan's cabinet on Thursday. It puts defense spending at around 2.5% of the country's GDP. Taiwan has increased its military budget every year since President Tsai Ing-wen took office in 2016. Military officials say that part of the budget will be used to pay for U.S. arms like long-range strike weapons and advanced tanks, which are set to arrive in Taiwan in 2024. It comes as the country is facing increasing threats from China. For more on Taiwan's defense budget and the country's potential military strategy, our reporter Jaime Okan spoke to a security analyst with the RAND Corporation, Raymond Guo.
Taiwan is now going to be spending 2.5% of its GDP on its military, and a record-breaking $19 billion in total. Is this the right direction for Taiwan?
It's been good to see over the last couple of years that the Taiwanese government has increased its defense budget as well as added emergency appropriations. So this is the right direction. I think further changes in Taiwan's defense budget are going to, you can always increase the amount of the budget you spend on defense, but ultimately it's going to require an increase in, unfortunately, the tax rate to actually just expand the pie as opposed to just giving defense a larger slice of them.
And when it comes to the systems that Taiwan should buy, there's still a debate that Taiwan should be pursuing asymmetric weapons, systems that are more mobile, that will survive in the event of a conflict. Should Taiwan be pursuing these weapons as well?
In terms of, if you want to pursue the asymmetric defense, then obviously Taiwan's ramping up its production of its anti-ship missiles, which is good. It needs to increase purchase. And then additionally, within the, we think about an invasion scenario, it's about sustainment. It's about how long can Taiwan last. And so for a lot of that, it's actually not weapons at all. It's more about having enough food or water, medicine, those sorts of supplies, stockpile. Taiwan has some experience with that vis-a-vis the pandemic, but this would be on a persistent basis on a larger scale.
Are there any other capabilities that Taiwan should be investing in, aside from the traditional tanks, fighter jets, and missiles that could survive in a conflict?
The more linked your forces are, the more they can apply power where it's needed. And so things like ISR, like good communications, are valuable not just within wartime, but also within peacetime. The fact that the more that Taiwan is able to communicate with, say, the United States or Japan and link up their militaries under secure communications, even in a peacetime setting, it's really helpful. And so investments in those sorts of technologies that I think are very, very important.
That was Raymond Guo, a security analyst with the RAND Corporation, speaking with our reporter Jaime Okan. Taiwan's military has invested billions of dollars into systems like tanks and fighter jets, but the war in Ukraine has shown that bigger doesn't always mean better. Once again, Jaime Okan reports on a company that's hoping to use new technology to enhance Taiwan's defense.
This T-shaped device might look like a household appliance, but it's actually an advanced defense system. It's called the TRadar Pro, and it's used to monitor and defend against small drones that could pose a threat to Taiwan.
So this is drone detection radar. It's a very lightweight, small. It can be put into a carry-on locker, so a single soldier can easily carry it. And once you take this item out of the luggage box, and we can simply just open this up, and then press the power up item and the button, and then the system will start running in roughly 10 minutes.
Weighing in at roughly 15 kilograms, it's much smaller than a conventional radar, which is usually fixed in a certain location and can't move.
And then I can see others, I can track it as well.
Once connected, this synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, uses special radio waves to create a real-time map of any drones or aircraft flying within 5 kilometers.
The invading drones can be as simple as a civilian, like DJI type drone, which can be easily taken down by a jammer, but it can also could be a hostile drone, like a military drone or like quasi-military drone.
Small civilian drones like the Chinese-made DJI pose a unique threat to militaries around the world. They're cheap, can be modified to carry weapons, and can capture and record video for surveillance purposes. Russia's war in Ukraine has seen small drones like these used to attack enemy vehicles and soldiers. And last year, this kind of threat made its way to Taiwanese territory. In August of 2022, in the outlying islands of Jinmen, a Chinese drone flew over a Taiwanese military base, and 2 soldiers tried to bring it down by throwing rocks at it. This gap in Taiwan's defense has pushed the military to invest more in a solution, and these radars are the first step.
And we're going to see some serious deployment in the next 2 or 3 years across Taiwan, and Taiwan is likely being the first nation in the world with such capability deployed.
This push for smaller, more mobile systems is part of what many call an asymmetric defense strategy. This means more small, mobile systems like shoulder-fired rocket launchers, anti-air missiles, and anti-tank weapons. But these weapons only work if you know where the enemy is. And that's why these radars are critical, because they enable Taiwan to increase its security without breaking the bank.
Still radar, but it's a new type of radar that architecture-wise, technological-wise, the manufacturing cost can be dramatically reduced. So we didn't expect that, but we just think that if we have a system that is good enough and is as a low cost can be produced in large volume, then we will find a good market for that.
Analysts say that Taiwan's military already operates a handful of radars, and the country can integrate different technologies and combine these systems to create a robust and complete defense of its airspace.
你固定的这种大型的正规雷达被摧毁的时候，你至少还是有一个小型的雷达可以展开一个我们称为 Air Defense Umbrella， 就是防空伞，可以维持局部的空优。这一点就是我们刚才强调了，从乌克兰战争中学到很多的这个 lesson。
The next step for the company is mass production, and it's hoping that in the coming months it can work more closely with the military, deploying hundreds of radars across Taiwan to defend the country's airspace. Justin Wu, Joyce Zheng, and Jaime Okan for TaiwanPlus.
Indigenous Taiwanese represent just 3% of the country's population, but they make up much more of the country's military. Now, as concerns mount over a war in the Taiwan Strait, Indigenous former soldiers are sharing the skills they learned with other Taiwanese. Rick Liao has this story.
43-year-old Ming Jie is teaching civilians combat skills he learned while serving in Taiwan's military. He was part of an elite armed forces unit based in the mountains not far from where he grew up. Ming Jie is Beinan, an indigenous group that has lived in southern Taiwan for millennia.
住在部落的原住民，他们对自己的这个民族跟传统比较会非常的守护。那我觉得这个军人也是一样，应该也是要有这样子的一个这个观念跟理念，就是我们要守护我们的家园。
Indigenous Taiwanese play an oversized role in national defense. They make up just 3% of the overall population, but as much as 60% of some of Taiwan's special forces. Indigenous communities often have higher unemployment and lower incomes than the rest of Taiwan, making the stable income of the armed forces an attractive option. Once done with military service, other indigenous former soldiers like Ming Jie are also now teaching civilians. Asai is Paiwan, and he aims to give his students first-hand real-world experience of some of Taiwan's toughest fighting conditions.
不是说真的可能学了这一些技能之后，你就是可能像电影里面的一些什么，像可能变成英雄啊，或者是呢，不是，就是希望就是我们能够在这个战场的存活率能够提高。
This is resonating with many Taiwanese who journey across the country to learn from these teachers. More than 40 people are attending this combat training session in the mountains of central Taiwan. Many attendees have travelled from the country's cities to learn firsthand the skills they believe they'll need in the event that Taiwan is attacked. Neighbouring China has been upping threats to take the self-ruled nation by force. It sees Taiwan as part of its territory and frequently sends military planes across the sensitive median line separating the two countries. Recently, as many as 25 Air Force planes in just one day. And seeing how Ukrainians have been forced to take up arms against a much larger aggressor, Taiwanese also want to learn how to defend themselves and their nation.
我想我会第一个站出来，就是跟着我们队友一起，跟着大家一起来去反抗对方。
Taiwan is facing up to what an attack by China could mean for the country and its people. Here, Taiwanese with the longest and deepest connections to this land are equipping their fellow countrymen with the skills they may need to keep that land free. Liao and Liao in Miaoli County for Taiwan Plus.
President Tsai Ing-wen will visit Eswatini in early September. The landlocked country is Taiwan's only remaining ally in Africa. The presidential office announced Tsai's travel plans on Friday. Her trip will span 4 days and 3 nights. During her trip, Tsai will attend ceremonies celebrating the country's 55th Independence Day and the birthday of the reigning monarch, King Mswati III. The leading candidate to be Taiwan's next president, Lai Ching-te, spoke with the country's Foreign Correspondents Club for the first time this election cycle. Joyce Zeng reports on what we can expect from a Lai presidency.
Taiwan's front-running presidential candidate Lai Ching-te has made a rare appearance to speak to foreign media at his party's headquarters in Taipei. He's the sole candidate of the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, and according to the latest polls, he is most likely to replace the outgoing president Tsai Ing-wen as she reaches her 2-term limit. Now, Lai is also currently serving as the country's vice president and has been in the spotlight recently given his trip to Paraguay with stopovers in the U.S. Now there he made no mention of his election platform, but now that he is back, he's starting to shed some light as to what kind of president he hopes to be.
I will lead a new era of values-based diplomacy under the principles of democracy, peace, and prosperity. I will extend our international cooperation, forge new linkages with global partners.
Those links include China. China and Taiwan have a contentious relationship, and that's because Beijing claims Taiwan as part of its territory, even though the Communist Party has never governed Taiwan. In his remarks, Lai said he's open to exchanges with China, but only under the conditions of parity and dignity. With under 5 months to go until January's elections, Lai will be shifting gears more strongly from vice president to presidential hopeful. And given just how many foreign correspondents showed up to hear him speak, it's clear that not just Taiwan, but the world is watching. Howard Zhang and Joyce Zhen in Taipei for Taiwan Plus.
As one of Taiwan's 13 diplomatic allies, Paraguay benefits from a number of bilateral initiatives. Sally Jensen went to visit one of the beneficiaries of a Taiwan-funded project aimed at empowering women entrepreneurs on the outskirts of the country's capital.
The intricate art of Nyandutí is not easy, and Graciela Amaria knows this best. She learned the traditional Paraguayan handicraft from her grandmother when she was 12 and has been making it ever since.
El Nyandutí es muy importante y fue siempre el motor de la familia. Traemos de cuna, de corazón, lo que es el tejido. Es una expresión del alma.
Until recently, Paraguay's Nyandutí culture was under threat. Fewer young people were taking up the textile art. But now, with the help of a Taiwan-funded program, Amaria is able to train up the next generation.
Es una escuela donde nosotros podamos enseñarles cómo para que tener calidad de vida, para que puedan salir de las drogas.
Paraguay has one of the highest rates of income inequality in Latin America and has high rates of drug trafficking at the border with Brazil and Argentina. women are one of the groups most affected by poverty. As one of Taiwan's 13 diplomatic allies, Paraguay gets help from its bilateral funding programs. Remujer PI aims to empower women entrepreneurs like Amaria with a sum of up to $3,000 to get their business off the ground. It also offers vocational training in a number of industries.
很多妇女啊都很需要我们来帮忙。这个理想就是说，希望我们的邦交国家的能够整个社会或者整个经济能够更繁荣。台湾跟巴拉圭两个国家的这个邦交能够更巩固啊。
For Taiwan, helping its poorer allies is also a way of empowering itself, as it has been losing its diplomatic allies to China. China refuses to allow countries it has relations with to recognize Taiwan, which it sees as part of its own territory. On a recent trip to Paraguay, Taiwan's Vice President Lai Ching-te stressed the importance of the Remujer PI initiative for Taiwan's international image.
妇女赋权计划，我的感觉除了是巴拉圭的政府对台湾的长期以来的合作关系表达肯定以外，连他们民间都非常支持。
And for beneficiaries like Amaria, it's meant that she's been able to start selling abroad, making Paraguayan Nianduti a globally recognized art. The women who benefit from the Taiwan-funded project here in Paraguay are thankful for the boost to their business. And for Taiwan, it's hoped that the success of projects like these will help raise its profile not just with its diplomatic allies, but further afield. Scott Huang and Sally Jensen in Asunción for Taiwan Plus.
Coming up, we meet Taiwan's circus artist and his sear wheel. What's a sear wheel? Stay tuned to find out.
我75岁，现在还在创业中。
我是用生命在做事，
然后要做的话，我就永不放弃。
我们想要成为世界的品牌，站在世界的舞台。
一定要新的挑
战。我们自己肯定自己的价值。
透过我们的文化创意，从台湾这个点画出去。
你是 MIT 的？
我是 Made in Taiwan。
Taiwanese Boss, every Wednesday, 8:10 p.m. on Taiwan Plus.
For more stories from the Tech Hub, Taiwan, and around the world, download the Taiwan Plus app.
Welcome back. You're watching Taiwan Plus News. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has turned himself into the authorities in the state of Georgia and had his mugshot taken. This is the first time a former U.S. president has taken a mugshot. Trump is charged with attempting to reverse the results of the 2020 presidential elections and a dozen other felonies. Trump spent roughly 20 minutes in the jailhouse before heading back to his golf club in New Jersey. Trump is currently leading Republican Party polls to challenge current President Joe Biden in 2024. BRICS, a group of 5 of the world's biggest emerging economies, says it will admit more members. 6 countries will join Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa with the possibility of further expansion in the future. BRICS was formed 13 years ago to improve economic cooperation and counter the West. Brazilian President Lula da Silva said new members will be chosen based on geopolitical weight, not ideology. But experts warn the expansion could further hamper decision-making within the group, which requires consensus. For more on what the summit means for the global balance of power, our reporter Stash Butler spoke to the editor-in-chief of the China Global South Project, Eric Olander.
When I spoke to you last, you said you expected 1 or perhaps 2 members to join, but instead we saw 6. Well, what does that mean?
The fact that they chose Iran, again, that was not something I expected on the first round. I was expecting Iran later on because Iran is such a contentious choice with the U.S. and Europe that now has to confront an organization that has 3 of its most outspoken foes, Russia, China, and Iran in it. The other thing that was surprising was to see how Brazil, South Africa, and India really made a conscious decision to go against US and European interests and policies here, particularly with the vote on Iran.
So do you see this as a sort of setback for the US?
No doubt this is a setback for the US and for Europe too. I mean, there is absolutely no way to couch this, that in many ways this was a giant middle finger from this group to the US and Europe. And on top of it, they chose Russia as next year's venue for the summit. So in many ways, you're seeing the diminished influence of G7 countries and how decades and decades of neglect and duplicity and hypocrisy in many respects on the part of global North countries in their policies towards the global South are now, really causing great harm to their long-term interests. And I think this demonstrates that India's interests are not always aligned with the US. What we've seen with Modi and the decision on Iran and the BRICS and the talks with Xi, India is doing what India has always done, which is pursuing its own interests and its own national security concerns.
You mentioned the US and India being kind of key partners in the Indo-Pacific. Obviously, one of the key cornerstones of that relationship is the Quad security framework with the US, India, Japan, and Australia. Has that been weakened now? And, given that Taiwan plays such a sort of pivotal role in the thinking about security in the Indo-Pacific, is Taiwan's position more compromised now?
I think it's too early to say that the Quad has been weakened by this. And I think it's also, let's not overstate that any rapprochement between India and China is only going to be done in very small, intermittent, steps. But again, in terms of if I was waking up in Taipei and I'm waking up in Washington today to see the new configuration of the BRICS, it's a different world than it was on Thursday. And so if they don't take lessons away from what happened this week, then this is only going to accelerate in terms of the mobilization of global South countries aligned against US, G7, and even to some extent Taiwan interests.
That was Eric Olander, the editor-in-chief of the China Global South Project, speaking to Stash Butler. A new climate tax is causing controversy in Taiwan even before it got off the ground. Bing Wang explains.
Just days after Taiwan established the environmental ministry, it's already causing a stir among climate groups. The ministry announced it would start collecting carbon fees beginning 2025. But climate groups said the government promised it would start a year earlier. Carbon emission fees are charges imposed on companies for the release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, aimed at incentivizing emission reductions. The ministry says there wasn't a delay. The plan was always set to begin in 2025.
必须要累积113年整年的排放量为我们的征收基础。那这样的征收基础，厂商才能够依照这样的排放量来进行缴费。缴费的期程当然是114年。
Climate groups are concerned, suggesting that a fee rate should be set and collected by the end of this year.
如果不能够订定下的话，至少也可以比照说，像是新加坡的方式，能够是提出一个范围，让那个业者可以做一个所谓的减量政策规划的时候，有一个价格的依据。
Singapore uses a yearly scale system where carbon emission fees are increased every year. Environmental groups insist that the carbon fees should not be set too low and should be decided quickly. That way, businesses can lower their emissions each year and hopefully reach a net zero Taiwan by 2050. Klein Wang and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
In the hands of a talented performer, seal reel shows can be both physically impressive and emotionally meaningful. One circus artist is about to put his seal reel skills on display at New Taipei's prestigious Cloudgate Dance Theater over the weekend. Sandy Chi brings us this report on how he came to feel such passion in his performances.
Swing with grace and precision. This is 30-year-old circus artist Yang Shihao performing with a sire wheel. He's been training in the art for over 6 years. Starting circus performances in 2014, Yang first began doing tricks with hats before moving on to the sire wheel. Mastering it involved overcoming many challenges, both physical and mental.
大环就是你要开始面对你的恐惧，然后手会被压到，头会不会晕，然后那个恐惧，它其实，你每一次面对的时候，你都会觉得，就好像你要跳，你要高空弹跳一样，你每一次好像都要告诉自己下去了，就下去了啊！但后面都觉得 其实那些苦好像都没有我一开始所想象中的这么可怕。
But despite putting in the hours, Yang says he didn't used to enjoy using the wheel and was often afraid of making mistakes in front of crowds. But this all changed after a trip to southern France in 2017.
我想，哇，我刚做了什么吗？
A woman in the audience recorded a video of Yang's performance and put it online. It quickly went viral.
把我的影片上传到网络上的那个老奶奶，她有跟我分享一句话，她说 "You truly touch my heart when you're spinning with your partner. It's just like you play happily with another child in the playground. It's such a beautiful moment." 我那时候就在想，哎，她怎么看到另外一个小孩？另外一个小孩是什么？
At the time, Yang didn't entirely understand what that meant. But a year later, during another performance, a little girl told him that the wheel reminded her of a young girl because it looks like a butterfly. It was only then he realized how well it allowed him to represent all sorts of things, and how it allowed him to express himself.
我感觉到我在耍大环的时候，我不用担心别人怎么看我，我可以就像是一个小孩子一样，跟我小时候5岁的自己，尽情的在表演里面享受。
Finally understanding what his wheel means to him, Yang will continue to dance with passion and hopes his performances will be as meaningful to others as they are to him. Andy Xue and Zani Chi for Taiwan Plus.
Thank you for watching Taiwan Plus News. Remember to download the Taiwan Plus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, we leave you with images of classic cars back on the road in Gaza City. I'm Liao. Take care, and I'll see you next time.